Well, hello everyone, and welcome to the show. This is the very first podcast episode put on by the Methow Beaver Project, and we are in the Methow Valley, the beautiful Methow Valley in north central Washington State. And we're very happy that you can join us for this first episode. Today we have a very special guest here with us today, Mike Callahan from way over on the East Coast, who's worked with beavers for many, many years. He was the founder of the Beaver Institute, and in 2000, he started Beaver Solutions LLC and has personally resolved over 1,750 beaver human conflicts. He teaches beaver workshops, started an online beaver management forum on Facebook, and created an instructional DVD to teach others to do this work as well. He's gained an international reputation as a leader in progressive beaver management. In 2017, he founded the Beaver Institute Incorporated to spread restorative beaver management and to improve watershed restoration and climate resilience. So, Mike, how are you doing today?
Doing great. Thanks for having me. I'm honored to be here, especially as on the inaugural broadcast. So thank you very much.
Yes, you're welcome. We're glad to have you too. And actually, I have no idea what state you're even in. Where are you today?
Massachusetts.
All right, nice.
Where
Massachusetts.
it's hot and humid today.
Okay. Well, I'm actually currently in Oregon recording. Just got back from a trip and I'm heading up tomorrow back to Methow Valley. It is also very hot here.
Yeah.
It's going to be like 100 a day, but I don't think it's as humid as the East Coast. I don't know. I could be wrong.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Well, yeah, it's getting hot. We'll be talking more about that with beavers and climate change,
exactly.
right?
That is one of the things. Yes. Okay, let me start us off with this. I'm wondering like where you grew up and if your upbringing had anything to do with where you are now. Like, did you grow up with beavers or anything like that that influenced your work?
That's interesting. Question. So I would say that my upbringing did contribute to, like all our upbringings contribute to where we are today, right? There wasn't one specific instance I can point to that said, oh, I'm going to work with beavers. In fact, it happened kind of accidentally. I wasn't even planning. I had a career in healthcare for 20 years before I got really involved with beavers. And, but as far as my upbringing, I was into Boy Scouts, appreciated the outdoors. We'd go camping with my family. My wife and I would go hiking and camping, and we'd see beaver dams, but I thought they were cool, but never gave them much thought. But I think just an overall, my upbringing gave me an appreciation for nature and for life in general. I think that's why I was in healthcare first. Really resonates with me when it comes to beavers.
All right, right on. Wow. Can you tell me about when you first got involved in beaver work and what that looked like and
Yeah,
why you did it?
Completely unplanned. Here in Massachusetts back in 1996, there was a voter referendum that restricted trapping. And, up to that point, like I said, I would notice beavers when we're out in the woods, but never gave it much thought. But beavers then became a very hot political topic. And, and the media just love playing it up, and as they do with everything, creating antagonistic sides, people that love the beavers, people who are having beaver problems, and just and so my wife Ruth and I kind of were observing all this drama and thought, there must be some kind of middle ground where we can have the animals around and not have roads and houses being flooded out. And so some animal welfare groups did a workshop that talked about some non-lethal ways to deal with beavers, and we learned from that and started a volunteer group. So and then it just I just loved it, and a couple years later started as a business, Beaver Solutions in 2000, and just kind of has pretty much taken over my life. So, but it's been a blessing. I love it.
That's fantastic. Okay. And when was it that what about the Beaver Institute? How did that start?
That started actually out of a little bit of frustration on my part that more people weren't aware of these very effective ways to manage beaver flooding problems. So as I said, we started a volunteer group in 1998, started my business in 2000. In 2011, I made an instructional DVD to teach people how to do this, but it never really, distributed a couple thousand copies, but I expected a lot of people to start doing it, but there was only a few more that were doing it. So I thought, well, with a nonprofit, that might be a good way to really focus on educating people, both professionally to do this work and raising awareness in the community at large to understand why when beavers cause problems, we shouldn't just kill them, get rid of them, that there are so many benefits to having them around.
Okay.
Yeah, so it started the Beaver Institute out of frustration that more people weren't doing this,
Mm.
and so in 2011, I created this instructional DVD that we distributed a couple thousand copies, but only a few more people started doing this work. And I thought maybe with a nonprofit, we could raise the public's awareness more about the value of beavers and also help to train more people to install these devices to resolve conflicts. So that it was really to try to, just help push the needle in getting more beavers on the landscape, because we need them desperately across the country.
Yeah, for sure. Has your role what let me look bigger. Has the Beaver Institute changed at all from when it started to now? Like, are you still doing the same things, or have you added a lot of different things maybe you didn't expect at first?
I would say our mission when we started was pretty much three-pronged. One was to um, train and focus on better progressive beaver management and promoting education about that and training for that. The other was to raise public awareness about beavers. And the third was to try to support research that was showing the best science behind all this. Uh, and we we just did a strategic plan with the board of directors, and we're still pretty much focused on those three. But I would say the bulk of our energies are more on the first two, the promoting progressive beaver management and training and educating, as well as trying to raise awareness. So um, as we grow as an organization, we hope to be able to generate the funding to be able to support more research, incentivize with grants, projects that promote coexistence. And we continue to grow, but it's, start off with just me and 3 volunteers on the board. And, now we have our first employee, and the rest of us are doing it on a volunteer basis still, but it's growing, and we're starting to have, we have a lot of really cool programs going on now, that I can talk about more later.
Sure. Wow, yeah, that's pretty neat. You mentioned workshops. Can you tell us a little bit about what those workshops look like?
Sure. Well, right now, in fact, next week I'm doing one in partnership with the University of Massachusetts Transportation Center Bay State Roads program. They're in charge of all sorts of trainings for DOT highway people. And so next Tuesday, I'm doing a workshop with them where, it's just teaching these people that are dealing with beavers all the time, because highway departments are they have the most beaver problems of any group,
Mm,
because beavers love plugging up the pipes under roads. And so it's training them about, why beavers do what they do, what their value is, and different techniques to protect their culverts and protect their roads, and do it in a way where it's going to save them money, save them time, make the roads safer. There's
mm,
when it comes to road protecting roads, it's pretty much a slam dunk using these devices.
mm.
And so we're trying to train them where they know about these techniques, and B, if they want to implement them themselves, that they have the resources and training to be able to do that, or they know who to call professionally, if they want to bring in a contractor to do it. So yeah, so that's I like teaching, and I love the idea of spreading the word, so more people are doing things that are better for the taxpayers, better for the environment. It's just a win-win. So the more we can let people know about this stuff, the better.
Yeah, right. It's funny because culverts, that was my first experience with beavers kind of as well. I mean, I grew up kind of on a rural area with beavers, and our neighbors, their road into their house and their property went right by a pond. It was kind of a road that was put in across a stream, and the water built up, and the beavers found it, were like, hey, this is great, except there's a hole here. We need to dam this up. So my the neighbor lady, really nice lady, she would go out there at least monthly and pull the sticks out.
Yeah.
And I remember, asking her about that. I was like, why do you have to keep doing this? What's the problem? And I think eventually they got some kind of beaver device or screen. I'm not sure how
Okay.
well that worked, but I remember she was frustrated with that, and that was the problem. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Oh, yeah. I've seen where homeowners or highway departments were clearing out culverts, and they would pull everything out in the morning, let the water drain. The beavers would be back at night, plugging it back up. And every day this dance would go on. And I'd come up to the site, and you'd see two piles on each side of the culvert of sticks that they've been pulling out, higher than I am. And, this has been going on a while, and it just shows you yeah, both humans and beavers can be pretty stubborn, I guess,
oh
in
man, oh
doing what
man,
they do. Yeah.
yeah,
So, and actually, for maybe this be a good time for me to just mention, why do beavers do this, right?
sure.
Um, so beavers are an aquatic mammal. They're really well adapted to the water. So they've been around millions of years, and they've been around when there were saber-toothed tigers, mountain lions, wolves, all these different predators. So they build these dams, turning small streams into ponds, because it protects them. They they're strict vegetarians. They chew down trees and eat the bark for food. They'll eat other aquatic vegetation and grasses, but they want to be in the water where it's safe. So, we're talking about how the roads are common problems where beavers will plug them up. And that's because to them, the roadbed looks like a dam, I'm sure, and it has a hole in it. And they've evolved to detect holes in their natural beaver dams, and they plug them up. And they do the same thing with our pipes. So anytime they feel or hear water escaping, they'll try to plug it up. So that's why road culverts are such a preferred place for them to dam. But they're smart. They'll pick, even in the absence of man-made structures, roads, or um, anything else. They will pick spots on the stream where the least amount of work gives them the biggest pond. So where like marshes funnel down into a stream, they'll sure enough dam every time right where it narrows into a stream where they can spread the water out and create a big pond for themselves. So, they do a lot by instinct, but they also are able to process and learn things. So, they're pretty cool animals. They're
Yeah,
called nature's engineers for a reason. Next
yeah.
to us, they're uh, beavers are change the environment to suit their own needs more than any other animal.
Hmm. That's incredible. Huh. Yeah, what was I gonna say here? Oh yeah, yeah. Okay, so with the culverts and the devices that you have helped develop and build and help other people figure out how to build as well. I'm sure it's really hard to just describe this over audio, and I'm sure folks could go to your website to maybe get a picture or Google this or something. But can you try to describe, like, paint a picture for us of what can be built around culverts so the dams or they don't get plugged?
Sure. So there's different ways to protect these culverts, or even to protect things from getting flooded from freestanding beaver dams. I mentioned how beavers are very good at detecting the flow of water and wanting to stop that. So you have to understand that ability of theirs in order to devise techniques that they won't mess with. So for example, there's what we call a pond leveler pipe, and we use black corrugated plastic pipe, and we'll dig a trench into the dam, say to down to the height that we need the water to stay at, bury that pipe in the dam, and then the pipe runs out about 40 feet, and we put fencing around the intake of it. And that's usually 5 or 6 feet in diameter, a cylinder fence on the intake. And that the purpose of that is so when the beavers swim by, they can't feel or hear water going into that pipe. So that fools them, and they won't plug up the pipe. If we didn't have the inlet of our pipe protected with fencing and they felt water going into it, sure enough, they would just plug that pipe right up. And the same with culverts. They feel water going into these culverts. So we can protect those with fencing, and the fencing can be either deter them and make what was the easiest spot for them to dam, 1, 2, 5 foot diameter culvert, into what's now a much more difficult thing to dam with a fence that's like trapezoidal shaped, and the sides of it are like 12 feet long, and when now they have to dam around 30, 40, even 50 feet of fence to plug up that culvert, and that becomes too much work, and they'll go to the next to some easier spot upstream or downstream. So that fence will protect the culvert and keep it open so the water keeps flowing. It won't necessarily stop the beavers from damming somewhere else, so that could become an issue, or hopefully it won't, depending on what's in that area.
Hmm.
Um, Another way that will protect culverts, and this is the easiest way and something that people can do themselves, or highway departments can do themselves, is we'll we'll build what we call a diversion dam or a diversion fence. So just like beavers will go after the pipe and plug that up because that's the easiest spot, what if we build the beginnings of a dam about 10 feet upstream of the culvert, before the as the water flows towards the culvert, the beavers will come to that first. And if we using rocks or fencing, anything that starts a dam about 10 feet from the road, the beavers will start damming on that instead of the
Hmm.
pipe. And then you have the dam out in front by 10 feet of the culvert. If you get a big storm, spring runoff or whatever, it can go up and over that dam and through an unblocked culvert. And if they have that dam that close to the culvert, they won't try plugging up the culvert because they've got their pond. So they're happy and they'll use the culvert to travel through, but they'll have, that diversion dam will serve the same purpose for them as blocking the culvert. So if you give them that start, they'll almost always, build right on top of what you started.
Okay, wow. Do you think that the beavers are actually tricked by these things? Or do you think they kind of know what's going on and they're like, okay, well, I can't do anything else here. I'll just move on to the next spot.
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, a lot of people refer to these devices as beaver deceivers, and that phrase was coined by Skip Lyle, who invented. He mentored me. He was doing this before I was doing it. But does it fool them? I don't know. I think it's more that beavers assess the what's going on, and just like they can assess that, okay, there's water escaping here, this will be the easiest place to stop it. I think that's true, whether it's with the
Hmm.
diversion dam, or the opposite, the culvert fence, which makes it harder for them to dam. Then they'll say, oh, this is going to be too hard, we'll dam somewhere else. So I do think there's some thought that goes into where they choose to dam. But are we putting one over on them? I don't know.
Right on. Yeah, I don't know either. Who knows? Will we ever
Yeah,
know?
yeah.
Um, okay. How about, you've been in this line of work for a while. You've talked to a lot of people, taught a lot of people. What are like some of the most common misconceptions? Things
Huh,
people think about beavers that are just not true, or
okay.
wrong approaches.
Yeah, that's a good question. Two things immediately jump to mind. One is a lot of people think that beavers eat fish, and they don't. They're strictly vegetarian, and so people don't have to worry about their trout all getting gobbled up or their salmon. Otters will. They'll go after fish, but beavers no. And a lot of times I'll hear people think that beavers live in the dams. So when you hear the term a beaver lodge or beaver den, they think that the beavers are building these dams and living in them, but they're not. Those are solid structures of mud and sticks and stone and whatever else they can put in there. Some of the stuff we found that they put in beaver dams is funny, but the they'll build separate places to live. The dam is just like a man-made dam. Its purpose is to hold back water. There aren't living spaces in it. The beavers will build. A lot of people are probably familiar with the cone-shaped mud and stick structures that are out in the middle of a pond. That is what they live in, and they will hollow that out and have a living space above the water level. We get generally with two or more tunnels that start well underwater and come up to the living space. The other place they can live is they'll burrow into the bank of a stream. So if there's not, or a riverbank, and hollow out an area in the embankment, usually using the roots of a plant that will help hold the roof together so they can breathe and get some air through that, but not collapse on them. So bank lodges or regular dens out in the pond are two places they live, not in the dam.
Okay, right on. I have to circle back because you mentioned some funny things that beavers use to make their dams. What have you found in
Okay.
these dams?
Well, the most outrageous thing I would say was we were working for a railroad and they were replacing the creosote ties in the railroad, and there was a whole stack of them by the tracks. And the beavers somehow, I have no idea, somehow they got one of these creosote. I couldn't lift it. I don't know what happened. Maybe one was on the ground and somehow they got it rolling or something. I don't know. But they got one of these creosote ties down the embankment and stuck it right into their dam. And when we went out there, and the railroad superintendent saw it, he was like not happy. But yeah, so that was pretty amazing. But I've seen golf shopping carts in there and dammed on golf balls all the time.
Golf balls.
Yeah, I guess people practicing just hitting golf balls
Oh,
into the woods and into the water, and beavers are very dexterous with their hands, and so they'll scoop up mud and pick up stones and place them on their dam. And so anything that's in the water, they'll if they can move it, they will. And they can move some pretty big things. It's pretty cool. I guess one other misconception I just thought of about beavers is a lot of people think that they will transport the mud on their tail or pat it down, pat the mud into the dam and pack it with slap it with their big flat tail. But as best I know, they don't do that. They will use their tail for steering when they're swimming.
hmm.
Not too often for propulsion, but occasionally if they really want to get a quick jolt forward. But yeah, they don't use their tail too much for swimming, just like a rudder for steering.
Nice. Well, hey, if you're tuning in and you're a golfer and you golf your golf balls into the woods, I figured out where they're going, guys. So you can thank me for that. The beavers got them. Go check the nearest beaver dam. Oh
Yeah,
man, that's good.
yeah. Go find your Titleists in the mud of the dam.
Okay, early on you mentioned kind of like this balance or middle ground between in the whole beaver conflict. And I wanted to ask you a bit more about that. Can you talk about like the two extremes, or maybe there's more than one, more than two extremes of how to view beavers and where you see as a good middle ground with that balance?
By the extremes, I assume you're talking about just kill them all, let God take care of sorting them out, or just let them run amok. Is that what you mean?
Sure.
Yeah,
Yeah. Well, I
yeah.
guess
I
I'm
mean, you
asking what
do
you
see
mean.
those two extreme attitudes sometimes. Uh, but actually, I would say that most people that I run into, even people that are having issues with beavers, don't want to kill the beavers, but you often will have them killed just because they're not aware that there are other options. Um, I think most people have an attitude of, live and let live whenever possible. But when it comes to having their own property damaged or whatnot, they're going to do what they think they need to do. So that's where, the education comes in, and trying to let people know all their options and make an informed decision rather than just the traditional one, because that's kind of a knee-jerk reaction that us humans have. If an animal's causing a problem, well, then just kill it, get rid of it. And so but when people are aware of different options, then I think more often than not they'll choose them when they can.
Hmm. Okay. Yeah. Is there a time and a place where you would lethally trap beavers?
Yeah, that's a good question. There are some people that say you never have to. Having personally assessed over 2,000 different conflicts over the years and putting in devices where sometimes they didn't work, I've seen in my experience, probably 3 out of 4 beaver problems, I will recommend non-lethal water control devices, but about a quarter of the time, they're not going to be feasible. Now, that might be because for a variety of reasons, but some of the basic reasons are one problem is agricultural properties that have drainage ditches. Excuse me. If beavers start damming in a ditch, and I learned this the hard way, you put a pipe through that dam to control the water level. Well, the ditch is uniform in width, so the beavers can just as easily build another dam, and they will, immediately downstream of where you put the pipe through, because they want the water higher. And then you could extend the pipe and through that dam, and then they'll build another one. And so that becomes sometimes just a situation where you're going to be chasing them and putting, pipe everywhere, and it's just not going to be feasible.
Mm,
There is, when beavers are in a public water supply,
mm,
then typically they'll be trapped out, which actually isn't really based on a lot of good science. But that is the norm, unfortunately. Beavers can carry an intestinal parasite called Giardia and another one called Cryptosporidium. And those, when they can cause illness in humans with vomiting and diarrhea. In over 20 years, I think I've had it twice, and antibiotics got rid of it quickly, but it's not anything anyone wants. So and you definitely don't want it in a public water supply. But
mm,
where the science is very murky is that while beavers can carry it, any mammal can carry it. A third of humans carry it without symptoms. Wading birds can carry it, and muskrats and all kinds of other creatures, right? So you get rid of the beavers, but it doesn't, does it really end up making much of a difference? I don't know. You still got herons and other wading birds coming and going. Good luck trying to ever control that. Muskrats and other animals. So, usually beavers will pick it up from human contamination. If a
mm,
septic system, because some people carry it without symptoms, they if a septic system gets flooded by a beaver dam, then the beavers can pick up that um, intestinal parasite, or people are camping in the woods and not appropriately disposing of their waste, that kind of thing. So yeah, so that's another instance. I kind of digress, but the for anyone who's interested in learning more, there's a really good video on YouTube that was made by Art Walensky, and it talks about the myth of beaver fever, as it's called. I think that's
mm,
another reason, because it rhymes. Beaver fever kind of caught, and beavers are pointed to as being the lone culprit, which they're not.
mm,
So that's another instance where beavers are trapped out. What I'll find is I'll also recommend trapping, unfortunately, it's always as a last resort, but where we have development in a floodplain. Sometimes people's yards or septic systems or basements were built in a floodplain. And while that may not happen nowadays, now that there are regulations, it happens all the time that these existing structures are there. And so there may be a nearby stream, and any elevation of that stream level is going to cause problems. So those really become an area where beaver damming can't be tolerated as long as those human structures or interests are sitting in a floodplain. So, that just points the importance of good planning, in
mm.
wetland protection, building codes and whatnot, so that, because it's a shame, you could have beautiful habitat that would be ideal for an ecologically diverse and rich ecosystem that the beavers could create, and yet you can't have them there because someone's septic system is going to get flooded.
Mm.
So those are unfortunate, but fortunately the majority of times, we can do something that'll allow the beavers to stay. It may limit how big of a wetland they can create, but it allows them to stay and have a wetland and get as much of the benefits from the ecosystems that we can get.
Yeah. Okay, here, pretend I'm a rancher I've got this irrigation ditch. Say we had a beaver dam, it's causing problems. We put in a pipe, we realize they're just gonna dam it over and over and 10 foot down or whatever.
Hmm. Yeah.
What do you recommend at that point for the rancher?
Well, as I said, it's tough when you have irrigation ditches or any man-made canal to really coexist with beavers there. But sometimes, depending on the circumstance, there are tricks you can do. For one thing, I would look at why. Well, first thing I would say is the beaver can be a nuisance, but it can also be a great benefit to your ranch.
Mm,
But if we, so long as we can store water on the land, you're going to have a better, higher water table. The surrounding plants are going to survive much better during the dry season. There'll be more grass for the cattle or whatnot. So there's a lot of uh, value in keeping water on the landscape. So with that in mind, let's look at how we can work with the beaver to achieve that and get those benefits without you having negative effects. And now, so if it's damming the ditch, well, that can be a challenge. But if we look at, well, why are the beavers damming that ditch? Is there because they need food too, right? They need the water for protection, but they also need something to eat. So are there they have their preferences for trees for food, willow, cottonwood, birch, cherry. There's a lot. Aspens like candy. Poplar is their favorite. So are there a lot of these types of trees nearby the ditch, and maybe fencing it off or removing some of the food supply might allow the beavers to move upstream or downstream where we may want them to be. Or is there a culvert they're going after under one of the roads that we can protect and discourage them from wanting to dam there at all? But it really is one of the things I like about this work is that every situation is different,
mm.
and there's certain principles, certain tools we have that we can use, but it's really looking at each spot and determining uh, what the person's property owner's issues are and trying to um, address those, as well as anticipate, well, if we do this, what will the beavers do in response? Because sometimes it's a chess game. We do this, they
Yeah.
do that, we do this. And I've had that with devices where especially early when I started doing this. I remember one place going back time and time again where I would do something where I thought they were getting in, then they still got in. I would try something else and they would do something different, and it was back and forth, back and forth. But I kind of liked that. It was a good challenge. Finally, I figured out, and they were able to stay, but they stopped plugging up the road culvert. So for this rancher, would be looking at their property and seeing, what their issues are and what potential benefits they could get, and just trying to work it out. And hopefully we could find something where everyone can benefit.
All right. Nice. I want to talk about trapping because we've talked about trapping, but there's lethal trapping and then there's non-lethal trapping.
Mm,
Can you talk about that and maybe talk about
sure.
how often if ever, lethal trap in terms of ratios?
Yeah, that's where people need to know what the regulations are in their state because it varies by state. In states, particularly out here in the East, where there's a robust beaver population, they're typically, like in my home state of Massachusetts, beavers were, they after being gone we didn't even touch upon that, but the history. But beavers returned to Massachusetts in the 1930s, and initially, our state biologists, when they cause problems, they would live trap them and move them someplace where they wouldn't be causing problems, but we'd get the ecological benefits. But eventually, as the beaver population rose, they started running out of places to put them, and then for decades, the only solution when there was a problem was trap them and kill them because you couldn't move them anymore. So that's still true that it's illegal in many states, including my own, to relocate beavers. And there's actually some good reasons for that. One is beavers are territorial and they won't let other beavers into their territory. So you can't just take a beaver and plunk them into any beaver pond, because the resident beavers will actually attack that beaver to protect their turf. They know at some level instinctually that there's a limited food supply and they want to stay in one place as long as they can, because they've evolved to avoid moving around the landscape if they can help it, because there used to be a lot of predators. So they want to stay put, and so they don't want they're very social in their own family, but they don't want outsiders in their pond. So that's one reason why it's tough to relocate when there's a lot of beavers around. Plus, while it's not necessarily a big issue with beavers because they don't interact with other animals much, the biologists don't want the risk of someone moving an animal that's diseased and spreading a disease.
Mm.
And finally, they don't want someone moving an animal that might cause a problem for somebody else. So when it comes to relocation, those things have to be kept in mind. Um, so in the state, so many states where there's a high beaver population, you can't relocate. But fortunately, there are some states where there aren't a lot of beavers and they need more, that do allow relocation. I believe Oregon, Washington, Colorado are among those. But that's always in conjunction and with the approval of the state wildlife agency. So there, and so that can be a way to, just like in the early days of beavers' return to Massachusetts, that can be a way to resolve a conflict and still have the beavers on the landscape doing what they do, and hopefully in an area where they're not causing problems. Ultimately, as the beaver population grows in these areas, the same pattern will follow, where there won't be places to move them to. So, and that's where the water control devices, come in to try to further maximize the benefits that we can get from these beaver wetlands. And then there's also an interesting side issue, maybe, of relocating beavers when maybe they could have stayed where they are if the non-lethal device was used. So, just like when trapping was and killing the beavers was the knee-jerk reaction because it was the only thing they knew, we have to be careful that relocation doesn't become a knee-jerk reaction. Oh, beavers are here, they're causing a problem, get them out of here, move them up into the high country, because we really want to embrace coexisting with these animals as much as possible. And so whether it's live trapping or lethal trapping, the Beaver Institute, we strongly support leaving the beavers where they are whenever possible, and only trapping them as a last resort.
Mm. Yeah, and to add, from the Methow Beaver perspective in Washington State, that's what we're also doing, and legally in Washington State, you can trap beavers for 5 months out of the year, lethally. And then, yeah, there's regulations. If we want to move a beaver, we have to check with the local government. But yeah, we're trying to move more towards keeping the beavers where they are if we can figure out how to coexist with them. Prevent flooding, prevent the certain trees being chewed down or whatever it takes. Um, because then if the beavers are on that part of the landscape, you have all those ecological benefits that the beavers bring.
Yeah, yeah. I just like to extend my kudos to your program because I had the good fortune of visiting and working with you guys a few years back, and I was so impressed with how you guys live trap and bring them into the refurbished fish hatchery and get them all pair them up and get them ready to be able to be relocated, and just all the education that you do to raise awareness in Washington and Eastern Washington. And it's what a great program you guys have.
It is a good program. I can't take any credit for that at all, though, because I am the summer intern.
Go
But
ahead, go
yeah,
ahead. Yes, thanks.
uh, you had mentioned climate resilience.
Yeah,
Can you talk about what that means and how beavers play a piece in climate?
sure. um yeah, despite the deniers with their own agendas, it's pretty clear we're getting warmer on this planet, and with that comes all sorts of challenges. Obviously, I mean, it's just heartbreaking that here in Massachusetts, there are days where the sky's brown. And why? Because it's your trees we're looking up into the sky at. It's just horrible. Um, so, at any rate, what's cool about beavers, among the things that are cool about beavers, is that they they can help us what's the word I'm looking for? Temper the effects of climate change with what they do naturally, and they do it for free. By building these dams and sequestering water in them, they're storing surface water, right? So that can act as fire breaks. There's a great documentary Sarah Konigsberg made, Beaver Believers, that showed with Kent Woodruff, who was instrumental in the Methow Beaver Project and others, just showing how the wildfire came up to this beaver pond and it stopped it. And so, not that beaver ponds are going to stop wildfires, that's not what I'm saying, but it helps create breaks in these fires and create small or sometimes large oases for the plant life, for animal life to escape the fire, and then be able to act as seeds, essentially, to help the landscape recover after a burn. So it's surface water plus, it's also been shown, because there's much more water stored underground than is on the surface from beaver ponds. So what we're seeing is only a percentage of the water that the dams are really storing. And by storing water in the ground, the water table's higher, and the plants in the surrounding area are more resilient to fire, and they're more lush and creating more biodiversity and more places for all these different creatures to live. So the big effect is the water storage that the beavers have, but there's other positive things that can help us fight the changes from climate. The biodiversity aspect. I mean, beavers are a keystone species, and what that means is their dams create these ecosystems that, like the keystone in an arch, if you remove that keystone from an arch, the whole arch collapses. Well, if you remove beavers from that ecosystem, their dam deteriorates, the whole ecosystem collapses. So that's that's what I love about this work, is that it's not just about the beaver, it's about all the benefits, all the effects that this one animal has. So, with climate change and biodiversity being threatened, and, habitats shrinking for a lot of animals, creating these beautiful, lush areas for the plants, animals, and insects to thrive is really valuable. So, um, and then we're with climate change, water pattern, rain patterns are different, right? So streams are running dry, or out here it affects us with too much water. We get huge storms, and we're getting things washed out because there's too much water. Everything's shifting around. And when you have beavers on the landscape, they make a series of dams typically, and these dams act as kind of like checks to the flow. So if we get a huge storm, each beaver dam holds back a little bit of the storm runoff, and it decreases the damaging flooding downstream, because not as it'll hold it back and then release it slower. And in the same way, in dry periods, these beaver ponds are holding back water that would have just run downstream and been gone in the spring, but now they hold it onto it, and the dams slowly release water, both through the ground as well as through the dams themselves, so that when streams would be very low in water during the summer, then there's more water in them, and it's cooler water because it's gone through the ground and percolated up. And so the streams are healthier. So that has tremendous benefits for salmon and fish, in these streams. In fact, I was told by the head of NOAA, who the head of the salmon restoration in Oregon, Rob Walton, that if they just had more beavers building more dams, the coho salmon could be delisted as endangered species, because that's how valuable these beaver ponds are for salmon. Not just in the water flow, but they're great nurseries for the young. So you get a lot more young salmon surviving, and they grow faster because there's a lot more food for them to eat in these beaver ponds than in what we consider a pretty pristine stream that's running through. So, so there's just all these tremendous benefits that we can get, it won't stop climate change. That's on us, but that will help to slow down some of the losses from climate change until hopefully we as humans get our acts together. So yeah, so the more we can do that, and I didn't even mention that, when beavers build dams, they store carbon, so these beaver wetlands are sequestering carbon in the peat and the sediments that they accumulate. And as long as they stay wet, as long as the beavers are there, that carbon stays stored in the ground. When beavers are gone and they dry out, some of that carbon's released. But overall, these wetlands do store carbon, which certainly is a good thing.
Nice. I heard that another species that might be delisted is your missing golf balls, actually, because we know where they are and we know how to get more golf balls. Give them to the
we can
beavers.
delist them. Yeah.
That's fantastic. Okay, so what's next for the Beaver Institute in the next 5 to 10 years? Where do you see your organization going?
Yeah, I'm pretty bullish on the future. I'm really excited by the direction things are going. One of the things that we're doing is in March, we're having our second International Beaver Conference. It's going to be in the Baltimore area. It's to complement the beaver conference that's held every other year in Oregon, and the State of the Beaver conference there, and we had our first one in 2020. We got it in just the week before COVID shut everything down. It was we were so lucky.
Hmm.
So I'm hoping we have the same luck now that Delta is rearing its ugly head in places, that March we won't have an issue with it. But yeah, so we're planning that now, and pretty excited. We had people from Europe, Canada, US, and like 40 something great speakers, 3-day conference. So that's coming up. One thing that I'm really passionate about is what we call our Beaver Core program. And the Beaver Core program is a professional training program to teach people how to build and install water control devices and what are called beaver dam analogs, to help restore and size streams, and so that's needed a lot out west, with you guys.
Mm.
But yeah, right now we have 30 something people either in the program or graduated from the program, and they're out there doing this work. And we're trying to build up our social media so we can get more people aware of what these people are doing, and the benefits, and help to get this even wider, done even wider. So while we have 30 people right now, 30 something people right now, our goal is to have 100 people trained by the end of next year. And so that's something that I'm pretty happy about. And ideally, we started it, it's just started, and we hope to build on it, a grant incentive program where we can help landowners pay for these devices, and help to, because when something's new, people are skeptical. And we saw a program like that the Massachusetts Society of Prevention of Cruelty to Animals did in Massachusetts, where one county that had the least amount of flow devices, they started this grant incentive program, and now it has the most. And because it helps people take that leap of faith to try something new, and then when they see it working, word just spreads. And so we, last year, thanks to a nice grant from the Wiederhold Foundation in Connecticut, we started a pilot program in Connecticut where we have been helping landowners and towns install these devices, and that's working out great. So if we can get funding for more of it, the Animal Welfare Institute just stepped up, and they're helping fund this program. And so we really want to be able to be there for anyone who, has a beaver issue. We want to be able to help them out. So that's something that I'm excited about, that we're working towards.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like really good stuff. Especially, I mean, the grants, being able to fund uh beaver devices for landowners that can't really afford or don't want to or aren't willing to take that risk. That's pretty big
Yeah.
because, you know, I don't actually, let me just ask, like, how much does it cost to install a typical
Mm.
beaver device?
It varies. Like the diversion dams, they're almost free,
Hmm.
so that's nice. But for the pond leveler pipes or fencing and pipes, it varies between $1,000 and $2,000 usually, to have a professional for the labor and the materials. So, it's, when you think about, a washed out road can be tens of thousands of dollars. It's a really smart investment to protect the roads, or or a flooded basement or whatever. And that doesn't even take into account the societal environmental benefits of keeping the beavers around. So yeah,
Yeah.
we did the Beaver Institute, we published a study a year and a half ago from a town here in Massachusetts, Billerica, where we had 20 years of data of beaver management. And of those 55 sites, 43 of them were managed with water control devices, and the was 13 or something were trapping sites. And we did a cost analysis, and it showed that just from the taxpayer's point of view, they were paying, I think it was $180 less per site per year if they were managed with flow devices versus with trapping.
Hmm.
Because the flow device will last for more than 10 years with minimal maintenance, whereas when the beavers are trapped and removed, the habitat's still there. So new beavers are going to move in, usually within a year or two, if there's a healthy population in the area, and then you're right back where you started. So trapping is just nonstop, endless cycle, whereas that doesn't happen when we are able to use the devices. So yeah, so it showed definitively how the town was saving a lot of money using non-lethal management. And then I think the wetland acreage that was created was like 380 acres or something, but it was like providing the town with about over $2 million a year in water cleaning and ecological services. So
Wow.
it really is a no-brainer to do coexist with these animals whenever we can.
Yeah. Do you think we'll get to a point where landowners who allow beavers to move onto their property and stay will get any kind of tax credit or?
They should, because it is a societal benefit, right? And at least reduction in taxes, or something,
Hmm.
because that is it in many ways it's unfair to property owners to say, well, you can't do anything with it, this is wetland now, you can't alter it, but we're not going to help you out at all,
Hmm.
so yeah, in the ideal world, which we're far from,
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
yeah, there would be the ability for people to put those properties into, say, a conservation restriction, and get some sort of financial break for doing that, because it's doing society and our planet a benefit.
Yeah. Huh. Okay, as we're kind of wrapping up here, is there anything else we didn't talk about that you really want to mention?
One thing that I didn't mention that, just out of interest, is the historical context. Beavers, I mentioned, have been around for millions of years, and Native Americans, they lived and coexisted with beavers for as long the 10,000 years that they were here, and respected them and understood them, because understood what they did. And yet when Europeans came, beaver fur is great for making felt. And Europeans had almost completely wiped out the European beaver so they could make felt for top hats and fashion. And so when they came here, it was like, oh, we got another shot at it. There's more beavers. And, beavers really led to the exploration of North America. The trappers were the first white people that moved west from the east. And they were primarily trapping beaver as well as other things. So, and beaver pelts were essentially a currency. And so as it was unregulated trapping, so the beavers were pretty much completely wiped out as these trappers move further and further west. And what that has huge implications for us today, because what happened was all the streams changed. Everything that had beaver dams on it, and it's estimated there were like I don't know, 60 to 300 million beavers in North America at that time. And every stream pretty much had beavers, and beavers dramatically changed the characteristics of a stream. So when the settlers came, what they experienced as the natural landscape was actually quite altered from what it had been for thousands of years with beavers on the landscape. And so we built farms, we built roads, we built all this stuff, often in these abandoned beaver, what became meadows. And because that was flat land and had all this rich sediment in it, it was great for farming and for, putting roads and houses in. And so now that beavers are coming back, they've been gone for 200 plus years in most places. Beavers come back to these same streams and go to dam on them, but there's roads there and there's houses there, and so that's why we have a lot of conflicts, because we built all this infrastructure and housing without understanding that this had been a wetland for thousands of years. And so now we're kind of fighting nature, because beavers are trying to reclaim what their ancestors had dammed, and it's flooding what we've built there in their absence.
Yeah.
So that's one of the reasons we have a lot of issues where there are beavers. We're so
Mm.
much alike, we butt heads. We both want to use the land for our own purposes.
Yeah, control the water. Wow.
Yeah.
Huh. Okay, I got to ask you this question. I think I'm going to ask everybody that we have on the podcast. What's your favorite beaver story? You got any like bizarre, crazy stuff, hilarious things? Anything come to mind?
um the favorite beaver story. I don't know. The strangest one, I guess, was 4 or 5 years ago. I was working for a highway department here in Massachusetts, and they had opened up the culvert. And my plan was to put a device there, build a fence, and put a pipe. And it's the only time where I interacted with a beaver where it was aggressive, because it was pissed that its pond was drained out. And so normally beavers are very timid. The most aggressive they'll get is they'll slap their tails on the water and dive underwater and swim away. And that's about it. Well, this was an unusual beaver. It was standing its ground. So it was like right there in the dry, almost dry stream bed, 20 feet away from the culvert. So, okay, no big deal. I'll walk down and it'll scurry away, but it didn't, and it just stood there. And then it started hissing at me. Really, you're hissing at? And I don't blame it. I mean,
Yeah.
if someone had just wiped out my home, I'd be pissed doing more than hissing. But then I thought, okay, so then I just like tapped my rake on the ground, thinking that would be enough. No, it didn't go. It was determined, and I actually said, okay, you win. I backed up because I was afraid that this beaver would actually, bite my foot or something.
Oh man.
But I want to emphasize that in over 20 years, that's the only time I've ever had an experience with a beaver being aggressive like that. So they're pretty social animals. They groom each other and stuff. But this one was PO'd, but I guess I understand why.
Yeah, I think I would be too. Well, we covered a lot of ground here. The Beaver Institute, your story, how you got into working with beavers, what you do, climate resilience, golf balls. Yeah. Do you have like two or three sentences that you really want to nail home, key message, summary, or anything like that you want listeners to take away here?
Okay. Yeah, just I hope they come away with the insight that the best way for us to proceed as a species is for us to understand the animal community, and in this case beavers, and the effects that these beavers have on the natural world. What's best for the natural world is best for us as a species of humans. So the more we can learn and understand and work with nature, the ultimately the more we'll benefit. And, in what I've seen in the 20 years doing this work, working with nature is usually going to have the longest term success anyways. And so it really, these animals do incredible things. Nature has evolved over millennia to adapt. The species have adapt to the changes that beavers create in the landscape, and we need to respect that, and we need to live with that as best we can, and have our actions reflect that. And if we do, we'll grow as a species, and we will reap all sorts of benefits.
Yeah, that's good stuff. Well, where can people go if they want to learn more about the Beaver Institute and your work?
The Beaver Institute is easy to find online. It's beaverinstitute.org is our website. We also have Facebook and Twitter. One thing I didn't mention is there's I think you did mention it actually. There's a discussion group online on Facebook called the Beaver Management Forum. There's over 1,800 members on that, and you can ask to join. It's a great conversation from beaver experts and just people interested in beavers. So I recommend people check that out. And there on the website, there's a lot of information, instructional videos, self-help materials for people that have beaver issues. There's a referral page for professionals in every state. Yeah, check it out. There's a wealth of information on beaverinstitute.org.
Yeah, and I can verify the Facebook page. I think I found that group early on after I started getting interested in beavers. There's a lot that goes on there, so check it out.
Nice.
Well, Mike Callahan, we want to thank you so much for joining us and for our very first episode. Learned a ton, and it was a really fun conversation. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you. I'm honored to have been a part of it. So thank you. And thanks for all you guys are doing to raise awareness.
Yeah, well, we're happy to do so. Thank you to you, the listener, for tuning in. This is podcasts by the Methow Beaver Project in Washington State. If you guys have any feedback for us on this first episode, we'd love to hear it. You can find our contact info at our website, Methowbeaverproject. Just Google that. If you want to leave a review for this, that would be incredibly helpful. Help more people find this podcast and learn about beavers and help with them. Next episode is going to be Dr. Emily Fairfax and all about beavers and wildfire. She's an expert in that, recently published. And tune in for that one. It's going to be a fun episode. We'll catch you guys later. Thanks for tuning in.